The dust devil danced across Main Street like a drunken specter, carrying with it the smell of dried sage and horse dung. Redemption Creek hadn't seen rain in 43 days, and the earth had cracked open like broken promises, revealing the red clay beneath. The late afternoon sun hung low and merciless over the jagged peaks of the Sierra Madres, painting everything in shades of rust and amber. Clara Whitmore pressed her face against the warped glass of the parsonage window, watching the town below. Her father's church sat on the hill like a weathered sentinel, its whitewashed walls gone gray with dust. Below, the saloon doors swung open, releasing a burst of laughter that carried up the slope. She envied that laughter, wild and free as tumbleweeds. "Clara," her father's voice cut through her reverie like a blade. "Step away from that window. Idle hands are the devil's workshop." Reverend Josiah Whitmore stood in the doorway, his black coat hanging loose on his gaunt frame. 2 years of drought had carved lines into his face deeper than any scripture could fill. His eyes, the same storm gray as Clara's, held the weight of too many buried children and broken families. "Yes, Father." Clara smoothed her plain brown dress and moved to the table where her Bible lay open to Proverbs. The pages were thin as moth wings, yellowed at the edges. She'd read every word 100 times, could recite whole chapters from memory, but lately the words felt like stones in her mouth. Outside, hoofbeats thundered up the street. A lone rider appeared through the heat shimmer, his duster coat billowing behind him like dark wings. Clara's breath caught. Even from this distance, she could see he rode different from the local ranchers. Loose in the saddle, one hand on the reins, the other resting near his hip where a Colt .45 gleamed in its holster. The stranger reined up at Murphy's livery, dismounting with the fluid grace of a man who'd spent more nights under stars than roofs. When he pushed back his hat, Clara glimpsed sun-weathered features and eyes the color of whiskey and firelight. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, silver against bronze skin. "That's Caleb McKenna," whispered Martha, the housekeeper, from behind Clara. "Lord have mercy on us all." Clara had heard the name whispered in the general store, hissed between gossiping wives. McKenna, gunslinger, drifter, trouble incarnate. Some said he'd killed 7 men in Texas. Others claimed he'd robbed a bank in Tucson. But watching him gentle his horse, speaking soft words as he loosened the cinch, Clara saw something else, a loneliness that echoed her own. The evening prayer meeting came too soon. Clara sat in the front pew, hands folded, back straight as a fence post. Behind her, the good people of Redemption Creek filed in, the Johnsons with their 6 children, Widow Patterson in her perpetual black, Judge Morrison and his pinch-faced wife. They sang hymns that rose like smoke into the rafters, while outside the coyotes began their nightly chorus. Her father's sermon thundered from the pulpit. All fire and brimstone. "The path of righteousness is narrow," he declared, his finger pointing at invisible sinners. "One step to either side leads to perdition. We must guard our hearts, our minds, our very souls against temptation." Clara's mind wandered to the stranger. Where would he sleep tonight? The boarding house wouldn't take his kind, perhaps under the stars, with only his horse for company. The thought stirred something wild in her chest. After the final Amen, Clara helped serve coffee and cornbread in the church hall. The women clustered like hens, pecking at gossip. "That McKenna fellow," Mrs. Morrison said, her voice dripping disapproval. "Sheriff Brady should run him out before he causes trouble." "Man like that brings nothing but sin and sorrow," agreed Mrs. Johnson, bouncing her youngest on her hip. Clara bit her tongue, pouring coffee with steady hands while her heart raced. What did they know of sin or sorrow? These women who'd never ventured beyond the town limits, never questioned the boundaries drawn around their lives? The moon had risen full and bright by the time the congregation dispersed. Clara helped her father lock the church, then walked beside him up the path to the parsonage. His cough had worsened lately, a dry rattle that spoke of too many years breathing dust and disappointment. "You were quiet tonight," he observed. "I was listening." "Father." "Good. A woman's virtue lies in her silence and obedience. He paused at the door, studying her face in the moonlight. You're 22. Clara. Past time you were married. I've spoken with Mr. Hartley about his son Samuel. Clara's stomach clenched. Samuel Hartley, 30 years old, already balding, with hands that grabbed too freely when no one was looking. Father, We'll speak no more of it tonight. To bed with you. Tomorrow brings its own trials. In her small room, Clara sat on the narrow bed, brushing her long dark hair by candlelight. Through the window, she could see the whole valley spread out like a patchwork quilt, the silver ribbon of the mostly dry creek, the scattered lights of town, the endless desert beyond. Somewhere out there, Caleb McKenna made his camp. She waited until her father's snores echoed through the thin walls, then slipped on her boots and wrapped a shawl around her shoulders. The window opened with barely a whisper. She'd oiled the hinges herself, planning for a night like this when the walls pressed too close and the weight of other people's expectations threatened to crush her. The climb down was easy. She'd done it as a child, stealing moments of freedom. The night air kissed her face, cool after the day's heat. She moved like a shadow through the garden, past the chicken coop, down the hill toward the creek. The creek bed was mostly dry, just a trickle of water over smooth stones. Cottonwoods lined the banks, their leaves whispering secrets to the wind. Clara found her favorite spot, a flat boulder where she could sit and watch the stars wheel overhead. So many they made her dizzy with possibility. She almost missed him in the shadows. He sat still as stone on the opposite bank, rolling a cigarette with practiced ease. The match flare illuminated his face for an instant, those whiskey eyes fixed on her with surprise that shifted quickly to something else. Interest, recognition of a kindred spirit. Evening, miss. His voice was low, roughened by trail dust and tobacco. Bit late for a lady to be wandering alone. I'm not wandering, Clara said, surprised by her own boldness. I know exactly where I am. He smiled then, a crooked grin that transformed his hard features. Reckon you do at that. He gestured to the space beside him. Creek's dry enough to cross if you're minded to sit a spell. I don't bite. Clara hesitated. Everything her father had taught her, every rule she'd lived by, screamed at her to run back to the safety of her narrow bed. Instead, she gathered her skirts and picked her way across the stones. Up close, he smelled of leather and gunpowder, tobacco and something wild she couldn't name. When she settled beside him, careful to leave proper distance between them, he offered her the cigarette. She shook her head. Reverend's daughter. He said, it wasn't a question. How did you know? Saw you in the window earlier. Besides, you got that look, like a bird that's forgotten it has wings. The words stung because they were true. And you, do you have wings, Mr. McKenna? His eyebrows rose. You know my name? Everyone knows your name. They say you're dangerous. They're right. He took a long drag, exhaled smoke into the night. Question is, what's a good girl like you doing talking to a dangerous man under a full moon? Clara looked up at that moon, so bright it cast shadows sharp as daylight. Maybe I'm tired of being good. Careful, miss. Words like that can change a life. Maybe I want my life to change. They sat in silence for a while, the creek gurgling between stones, an owl calling from the cottonwoods. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. What's your name? Clara. Clara Whitmore. Clara. He said it like he was tasting it. Means bright, clear. Suits you. How do you know what it means? My mother was a schoolteacher. Before... He stopped, jaw tightening. Long time ago. Clara wanted to ask what had happened to her, what had turned a schoolteacher's son into a gunslinger, but something in his face warned her off. Instead, she said, Tell me about the places you've seen. So he did. As the moon tracked across the sky, Caleb painted pictures with words, the endless grass sea of the plains, Mountains that scraped the belly of heaven. Deserts where the silence was so complete you could hear your own heartbeat. He told her about nights when the aurora danced green and gold across northern skies, about rivers wide as lakes and canyons deep as sorrow. Clara drank it all in, thirsting for a world beyond the narrow boundaries of Redemption Creek. When he described the ocean, which she'd never seen, tears pricked her eyes. "Why do you stay?" he asked finally. "If you want to see the world." "Where would I go? A woman alone with no money, no skills but teaching Sunday school and mending clothes." She laughed bitterly. "At least here I have a roof over my head." "There are ways." His hand moved as if to touch hers, then pulled back. A woman with courage could make her own way, and end up in a saloon, or worse. That what your father tells you? That's what everyone tells me. Maybe everyone's wrong. The words hung between them like a challenge. Clara met his eyes, saw something there that made her chest tight. Understanding, recognition, desire. Carefully banked but unmistakable. "I should go," she whispered. "Should you?" But she was already rising, brushing dust from her skirts. "Father wakes early." Caleb stood too, moving with that dangerous grace. For a moment they were close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. He smelled of freedom and possibility, of roads not taken and choices not yet made. "Will you come back?" The question seemed to surprise him as much as her. I don't know." He reached into his coat, pulled out something that gleamed in the moonlight. A silver dollar, worn smooth by handling. "If you do," he said, pressing it into her palm. "Leave this on the boulder. I'll know to wait." His fingers lingered against hers for a heartbeat. Then he stepped back, touching his hat brim. "Good night, Miss Clara. Sweet dreams." She ran then, holding her skirts high, the silver dollar burning in her palm like a brand. Behind her, she felt his eyes following her flight, but he made no move to follow. When she reached the safety of the garden, she turned back. He was gone, vanished into the shadows like smoke. Back in her room, Clara pressed her face into the pillow to muffle her gasping breaths. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged thing. She could still smell leather and tobacco, still feel the brief pressure of his fingers against hers. Through the window, dawn was already painting the eastern mountains pink and gold. Soon her father would wake, expecting breakfast, expecting obedience, expecting her to be the same dutiful daughter she'd always been. But Clara knew, with a certainty that thrilled and terrified her in equal measure, that something fundamental had shifted. She'd tasted freedom on her tongue, felt possibility singing in her veins. The silver dollar lay heavy in her hand, a promise and a temptation all at once. As the first rooster crowed, she hid the coin beneath her mattress and closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. All she could see was whiskey-colored eyes and a crooked smile. All she could hear was a rough voice painting pictures of a wider world, somewhere in the valley. A coyote howled, wild and free and utterly unashamed. Clara pressed her fist to her mouth and swallowed her own howl, saving it for later. For moonlight, for possibility, for him. The morning sun hit Clara's face like an accusation. She'd barely slept, and it showed in the purple shadows beneath her eyes, the tremor in her hands as she served her father's breakfast. The silver dollar seemed to burn through the mattress above, a secret that threatened to spill from her lips with every breath. Reverend Whitmore studied her over his coffee cup, steam curling between them like unspoken questions. "You look peaked. Daughter, are you ill?" "No, father, just restless sleep." His eyes narrowed. 23 years of raising her alone had made him sharp to her moods, her tells. "Perhaps you need more prayer. Idle minds invite the devil's whispers." Clara kept her gaze on the cracked china plate. "Yes, father. Good. After you finish the washing, I want you to visit the Morrison Ranch. Judge Morrison's wife has taken ill, and Christian charity demands we offer comfort." The 10-mile ride to the Morrison Ranch stretched under a sun that seemed determined to bake the world to ash. Clara drove the buggy, her father beside her, his Bible open on his lap, though the jolting made reading impossible. The landscape rolled past in shades of brown and gold grass burnt to straw. Joshua trees twisted into tortured prayers. Mountains shimmering like mirages. They passed the spot where the creek curved, where cottonwoods threw patches of shade. Clara's hands tightened on the reins. Somewhere nearby, Caleb McKenna might be camped, or perhaps he'd already moved on, taking his whiskey eyes and dangerous smile to the next town. The next adventure. The thought shouldn't have hurt, but it did. The Morrison Ranch sprawled across 1,000 acres of stubbornness and privilege, while her father tended to Mrs. Morrison's spiritual needs. Clara found herself cornered in the parlor by the judge himself, a man who wore his authority like a too-tight vest. "Your father speaks highly of your virtue," Judge Morrison said, tobacco juice staining his gray whiskers. "Says you'd make some lucky man a godly wife." Clara murmured something appropriate, her mind elsewhere. Through the window, she could see riders working the cattle, dust clouds rising like smoke signals, free men, going where they pleased, answering to no one but the trail boss and their own consciences. "My nephew Samuel will inherit a third of this ranch," the judge continued. "A woman could do worse." Could she? Clara thought of Samuel's grabbing hands, his wet lips, the way he looked at her like she was livestock to be appraised. Yes, she decided. A woman could do worse, but she could also do better. She could choose freedom over security, possibility over certainty. The ride home was silent except for her father's occasional coughing. The fits had grown worse, each one leaving him grayer, more drawn. Clara watched him from the corner of her eye, seeing for the first time how old he'd grown, how the frontier had worn him down like water on stone. "Father," she ventured as they neared town, "have you ever wondered if there's more than this?" More than what? More than Redemption Creek? More than the same faces, the same sermons, the same... She gestured helplessly at the barren landscape. His face hardened. "This is God's calling. Clara, we go where He sends us, serve where He plants us. To want more is the sin of pride. Is it sin to want to see the ocean? To know what lies beyond those mountains? For a woman, yes." His voice was flat, final. "A woman's place is beside her husband, tending his home, raising his children. These foolish dreams will only bring you sorrow." Clara bit her tongue until she tasted copper. The silver dollar seemed to pulse against her ribs where she'd hidden it that morning, tucked inside her corset like a talisman. That evening, while her father prepared Sunday's sermon, Clara walked to the general store for supplies. The town drowsed in the heat, dogs panting in patches of shade, horses standing hip-shot at the hitching posts. She kept her head down, bonnet shielding her face, but she couldn't help scanning the street for a familiar figure in a duster coat. Inside Harper's general store, the air was thick with the smell of pickle brine and molasses. Mrs. Harper, a sparrow of a woman with eyes that missed nothing, tallied Clara's purchases with practiced efficiency. "Heard that gunslinger's still in town," she said, voice pitched to carry to the other women browsing the cloth bolts. "Saw him at the saloon last night, playing cards with those no-account drifters from the Box T Ranch." Clara's heart stuttered. He hadn't left. "Is that so? Sheriff Brady ought to run him out before decent folk get hurt. Man like that carries trouble like fleas on a dog." "Mrs." Harper leaned closer, voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "Dolly from the saloon says he asked about you." "About me?" The words escaped before Clara could stop them. "Mrs." Harper's eyes glittered with malicious pleasure. "Asked your name, where you lived." Dolly set him straight. Of course. Told him the Reverend's daughter was too good for the likes of him. She straightened, adding louder, as if a decent woman would have anything to do with his kind. Clara gathered her purchases with trembling hands. The other women were watching now, their faces a gallery of judgment and speculation. She could feel their eyes following her to the door, could imagine the whispers that would start the moment she left. That night, she lay rigid in her bed, listening to the wind rattle the windows. The silver dollar was back beneath her mattress, but she could feel its pull like a compass needle pointing toward something dangerous and necessary. She thought of Caleb in the saloon, cards in his hands, asking about her. Had he been disappointed when Dolly rebuffed him? Or had he smiled that crooked smile, knowing she'd come back to the creek despite everything? The drought deepened as July bled into August. The creek dried to a trickle, then to nothing but smooth stones and memories of water. Cattle began to die, their bodies bloating in the sun until the ranchers burned them in great pyres that sent black smoke columning into the brass sky. The town's well dropped so low they had to ration water. Each family allowed only 2 buckets a day. Clara's father grew thinner, his cough worse. He preached about trials and tribulations, about God testing his faithful. But even his congregation began to wear thin. The Johnsons lost their youngest to fever. The Peterson farm went under, the family loading their meager possessions onto a wagon and heading east, back to civilization and rain. Through it all, Clara carried her secret like a stone in her chest. She hadn't returned to the creek. She'd been good, dutiful, everything her father expected. But at night, she dreamed of whiskey eyes and roads that led everywhere but here. The rumors started in late August. Riders had been seen in the mountains, rough men with no brands on their horses, no bills of sale for the cattle they drove. The Apache, mostly pacified for a decade, were growing restless on the reservation. And from the south came word of Rebel Jack Morales, a half-Mexican bandit who'd been cutting a bloody swath through the border towns. "We need law and order," Judge Morrison declared at a town meeting. "Sheriff Brady can't handle this alone. I propose we hire gunmen, fighters who know how to deal with their own kind. Fight fire with fire." Clara's father stood, his voice carrying despite the cough. "Judge, we are Christians. We cannot embrace violence, even in the name of protection. Pretty words won't stop bullets." "Reverend," someone called from the back. The meeting dissolved into arguments. Voices raised, tempers fraying like everything else in the drought. Clara slipped out, needing air that didn't taste of fear and dust. She found herself at the cemetery, where wooden crosses tilted at drunken angles, and the few stone markers were already being eroded by wind. Her mother lay here somewhere, though her father had never shown her the grave. "Died in childbirth," he'd said, and nothing more. Clara traced names on the markers, wondering about the stories buried beneath. Dangerous place for a lady after dark. She spun, heart hammering. Caleb stood at the cemetery gate, hat tilted back, hands easy at his sides. He looked thinner than before, a new wariness in his stance. "You're still here," she breathed. "Disappointed?" "No, I just thought, men like you don't stay in one place long." He moved closer, boots silent on the packed earth. "Maybe I found a reason to stay." The words hung between them, weighted with possibility. Clara knew she should run, should scream, should do anything but stand there drinking in the sight of him. Instead, she said, "I kept the $1. His smile was slow, dangerous. "But you didn't come back." "I couldn't. My father. I know." He was close enough now that she could see the dust in the lines around his eyes, the stubble shadowing his jaw. "I've been watching, waiting." "That's not proper. Darlin', nothing about this is proper." His hand rose, hovering near her cheek without quite touching. "You should tell me to leave. Tell me your promise to that banker's boy, that you'll live and die in this town without ever seeing the ocean. I can't." The words were barely a whisper. "Can't tell me to leave? Or can't marry him?" "Both. Neither. I don't know." She pressed her hands to her temples, bonnet sliding back. "I don't know anything anymore except that I'm suffocating here." Every day the walls close in a little more, and soon there won't be any air left at all. This time he did touch her, fingers gentle on her wrist, pulling her hands down. "There's always air, Clara. You just have to know where to find it." She should have pulled away. Instead, she turned her hand, lacing her fingers through his. His palm was calloused, warm, real in a way nothing had felt real for months. "Where?" she asked. "Out there." He nodded toward the mountains, the desert, the whole wide world beyond Redemption Creek. "It's hard living, no lie, but it's living, not just existing." And what would I be to you? Another town, another girl to leave behind. His grip tightened. No, you'd be... He stopped, jaw working. I don't know what you'd be. I just know I've never wanted to stay before. Never wanted to ask someone to come with me. A coyote howled in the distance, answered by another, then another, until the night filled with their wild chorus. Clara shivered, though the air was still warm. I should go, she said, not moving. You should. He didn't let go either. They stood there, hands clasped, while the stars wheeled overhead and the town slept its fitful sleep below. Finally, Clara pulled free, the loss of contact almost physical pain. If I come to the creek tomorrow night, she said, will you be there? Every night until you do. She ran then, skirts tangling, bonnet falling to hang by its strings. Behind her, she felt him watching, but like before, he didn't follow. When she reached the parsonage, she looked back. The cemetery was empty, as if he'd been a ghost all along. Inside, her father sat at the kitchen table, a lamp burning low beside him. His face was granite in the yellow light. Where were you? Clara's mind raced. The cemetery. I was praying. Don't lie to me, daughter. His voice was quiet, which was worse than shouting. Mrs. Harper saw you leave the meeting. That was 2 hours ago. I lost track of time. With him. It wasn't a question. The gunslinger. Clara lifted her chin, finding courage she didn't know she possessed. His name is Caleb McKenna. Her father's fist hit the table, making the lamp jump. I don't care what his name is. He's a killer, a drifter, a man without God or conscience. You don't know him. I know his kind. Her father stood, looming despite his illness-ravaged frame. I've buried the women they leave behind, seen the children they abandon. You think you're different? You think your virtue will tame him? I don't want to tame anyone. Clara shot back. I want to live. Father, really live. Not just exist in this dried-up town until I'm as withered as the corn. The slap came fast, sharp, spinning her head to the side. Clara pressed her hand to her burning cheek, tears blurring her vision. Her father had never struck her before, never raised a hand in anger. You will not see him again, he said, voice shaking. You will marry Samuel Hartley by Christmas, and you will be grateful for the protection of a good man's name. Am I understood? Clara met his eyes, tasting blood where her teeth had cut her lip. Yes, father. But as she climbed the stairs to her room, the silver dollar pressed against her ribs. She knew she was lying. Tomorrow night, she would return to the creek. She would choose the unknown over the known, possibility over certainty. She would choose him. 2 years passed like a fever dream, each day blending into the next in a haze of dust and duty. Clara stood at the schoolhouse window, watching her students scatter across the barren playground. The building was new, built with Morrison money after the old one burned in last summer's fires. Everything in Redemption Creek seemed to burn these days. The grass, the crops, hope itself. She touched the small scar on her palm, a memento from that night she'd never returned to the creek. The silver dollar had long since been discovered and confiscated by her father, but the memory of rough hands and whiskey eyes remained, surfacing at unexpected moments like water in a desert mirage. Miss Whitmore? Clara turned to find Timothy Edwards, age 12 and too serious for his years, standing at her desk. Yes, Timothy? Ma says to ask if you're coming to the church social Saturday. She's baking her apple pie. Of course. Clara managed a smile. Another church social. Another evening of Samuel Hartley's clammy hands and possessive glances. They'd been officially engaged for 6 months now, though she'd managed to delay the actual wedding with various excuses. Her father's worsening health had been the latest, after dismissing the last student. Clara locked the schoolhouse and began the walk home. The town had shrunk even more in 2 years. The bank had foreclosed on half the ranches, families loading wagons and heading for California or back east. Those who remained were harder, meaner, quicker to suspect their neighbors of stealing what little water remained. She passed the saloon, where a new batch of drifters lounged on the porch. Rough men had always passed through Redemption Creek, but lately they seemed rougher, more numerous. Sheriff Brady had taken to wearing 2 guns instead of 1, and even Judge Morrison had hired bodyguards for his ranch. The rumors from the mountains grew darker each week. Rebel Jack Morales had gathered a small army. They said, Mexican bandits and American outlaws united by greed and violence. They'd hit settlements to the south, leaving burned buildings and buried bodies in their wake. Some whispered he had a grudge against Redemption Creek specifically, though no one knew why. Clara found her father in his study, bent over his Bible, a blood-stained handkerchief crumpled beside him. The consumption had hollowed him out, leaving only will and scripture holding him upright. "Father, you should be resting." He didn't look up. "Samuel came by, says you've postponed the wedding again. Your health will not improve by waiting." He finally raised his eyes, and Clara saw death lurking in their depths. "I won't leave this world with you unmarried, unprotected. The wedding will be next month." "Father, enough!" The shout triggered a coughing fit that left him gasping, fresh blood on his lips. Clara rushed to support him, feeling how light he'd become, like a bird made of paper and faith. When he could speak again, his voice was weaker but no less determined. "You think I don't know why you resist? You think I've forgotten that night?" Clara stiffened. They'd never spoken of it since, an unhealed wound between them. "He's gone, Clara. Men like that don't stay, don't build, don't protect. They burn through lives like wildfire and leave only ash behind." His fingers, cold as winter, gripped her wrist. "Samuel will give you safety. Children." "A place in this world? A cage," she whispered. "Better a cage than a grave." He released her, sinking back into his chair. "The wedding, next month. Give me that peace before I meet my maker." That night, Clara lay sleepless, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere in the darkness, coyotes howled, but their wild song no longer stirred her blood. She'd learned to bury that part of herself, the part that had sat beside a dangerous man under a moon-bright sky and imagined freedom. The next morning brought a dust storm from the north, a rolling wall of brown that blotted out the sun. Clara helped her students stuff rags under the schoolhouse doors, but the dust found its way in anyway, coating everything with grit. They huddled together, singing hymns to drown out the wind's howl, until parents arrived to collect their children. Clara stayed behind to clean, though it was futile. Tomorrow would bring more dust. As she swept, she heard horses outside, many horses, moving fast. Through the grimy window, she glimpsed riders heading toward the sheriff's office, their faces masked against the storm. By evening, the news had spread through town like wildfire. A ranch 40 miles south had been hit. The Carlson family, man, wife, 3 children, found dead, their cattle stolen, buildings burned, water barrels smashed in what seemed like pure spite. "Rebel Jack," people whispered. Getting closer. Judge Morrison called another town meeting, this time when he proposed hiring gunfighters. Even Reverend Whitmore didn't object. They needed men who understood violence, who could meet savagery with savagery. "I know someone," said Jake Dalton, owner of the largest remaining ranch. A man named Kellerman runs a security outfit out of Tucson. Him and his boys cleaned up Tombstone after the Earps left. "Hired killers," Clara's father said weakly. "Hired protectors," Morrison corrected. "Unless you'd prefer we wait for Morales like sheep for slaughter?" The vote was unanimous. Dalton would ride to Tucson, hire Kellerman and his men. In the meantime, Sheriff Brady organized patrols, and families began fortifying their homes. Clara walked home through streets that felt different, charged with fear and anticipation. At the parsonage, she found Samuel Hartley waiting on the porch, his pale face eager in the lamplight. "Clara, dearest, I came to ensure you were safe." She let him take her arm, fighting the urge to pull away. His hands were soft, moist. "Nothing like—" She cut off the thought. "How thoughtful," she managed. "When we're married, you'll never need to fear. Father's building a new house on the ranch, with thick walls and good locks. You'll be protected. Protected, safe, caged. The words blurred together in Clara's mind as Samuel droned on about wedding plans, about the furniture he'd ordered from San Francisco, about the children they'd have. She nodded at appropriate intervals, but her thoughts drifted to that long-ago night, to talk of oceans and auroras and roads that led everywhere. A week later, Sheriff Brady's patrols spotted dust clouds in the mountains, riders moving in formation. The whole town held its breath, waiting, but the riders passed by, heading north toward richer targets. "They're scouting," Judge Morrison declared, "testing our defenses." The judge was proven right when the Hendricks Ranch was hit 3 days later. This time, the bandits left a message, carved into the barn door. "Redemption Creek next." Panic seized the town. Some families packed up immediately, preferring the dangers of the road to waiting for slaughter. Others dug in, boarding windows, stockpiling ammunition. Clara's father insisted on holding services as usual, preaching about faith in the face of fear, but his congregation dwindled to the most devout. It was during one of these sparsely attended services that Clara noticed the stranger. He sat in the back pew, hat pulled low, but something about his stillness caught her attention. When he shifted, she glimpsed a scar running from temple to jaw. Her heart stopped. After the service, as the faithful filed out, he remained seated. Clara busied herself collecting hymn books, hands trembling. Her father had retreated to the vestry, coughing. They were alone. "Hello, Clara." His voice was exactly as she remembered, rough, low, dangerous. She turned slowly, drinking in the sight of him. 2 years had added lines to his face, a hardness to his eyes. He wore his guns differently now, tied down for quick draw. "Caleb." His name felt foreign on her tongue. "You came back." "Never left, not really." He stood, moving closer with that remembered grace. "Been down in Mexico, up in Colorado, all over. But I kept circling back, watching from a distance." "Why?" "You know why." She shook her head, backing away. "It's too late. I'm engaged. Getting married next month. To that banker's boy." His lips twisted. "That what you want, Clara? Spend your life in his cage, bearing his children, growing old before your time. It's safe. Safe." He spat the word like a curse. "I offered you the world, and you chose safe. You offered me nothing." The words exploded from her. 2 years of suppressed anger and longing. A conversation under the stars, a silver dollar, pretty words about freedom. Then you vanished like smoke. Your father had me run out of town at gunpoint the next day. Sheriff Brady and 6 deputies. Told me if I came near you again, they'd hang me for the horse thief they claimed I was. His eyes burned into hers. I waited at the creek for 3 nights before they came. Clara's world tilted. He never told me. Course not. Easier to let you think I abandoned you. Caleb moved closer, and this time she didn't retreat. I wrote letters. Sent them through travelers passing through. Did you get them? She shook her head, tears burning her eyes. Her father, her righteous, protective father, who'd stolen her choices in the name of keeping her safe. Clara! Caleb's hands framed her face, thumbs brushing away tears. It's not too late. Come with me. Where? How? The town's about to be attacked. My father's dying. I have responsibilities. Excuses. His voice gentled. You're scared. I understand scared. But Clara, this town is already dead. It just doesn't know it yet. The drought, the bandits, the way people are turning on each other. Redemption Creek is finished. And you? What are you now? Caleb, another gun for hire? Another killer passing through? He smiled, that crooked grin that still made her stomach flutter. I'm whatever I need to be to survive. But with you... His thumb traced her cheekbone. With you, I could be more... Footsteps in the vestry made them spring apart. Clara's father appeared, leaning heavily on his cane. His eyes took in the scene. Clara's flushed face, Caleb's presence, and his face went gray. You! Reverend. Caleb touched his hat brim. mockery in the gesture. "Looking well. Get out!" Her father's voice shook with rage. "Get out before you what? Have me run out again? Call your sheriff?" Caleb's hand rested easy on his gun. "Things have changed, old man. Your town needs men like me now. We need nothing from you." "Father, please," Clara started. "Silence!" He turned on her, eyes blazing. "You shame me, daughter. You shame your mother's memory." "My mother who died in childbirth," Clara heard herself say. "Or my mother who ran off with the traveling merchant when I was 2? Which memory am I shaming? Father!" The silence was deafening. Her father's face went from gray to white, his cane trembling. "Oh yes," Clara continued, strength flooding through her. "I know the truth. Mrs. Patterson told me last year, when she was dying, told me how Mother couldn't stand the righteousness, the suffocation, the endless judgment, how she chose freedom over safety. And look what it brought her," her father whispered. "Dead in a San Antonio brothel, diseased and alone. But she lived first." Clara said, "She chose." Caleb moved to her side, not touching but close enough that she felt his warmth. "Clara, we need to go, now." Through the window, she could see riders coming down Main Street, Kellerman's men. She realized, hard-faced killers hired to protect what was left of Redemption Creek. Soon the town would be an armed camp, waiting for violence. "If you leave with him," her father said, each word precise as a nail. "You are no daughter of mine." Clara looked at him, this man who'd raised her, controlled her, loved her in his broken way. Then she looked at Caleb, who offered nothing but possibility and danger. "Then I suppose I'm no one's daughter," she said. She walked out of the church into the blazing afternoon, Caleb beside her, behind them. Her father called her name once, voice breaking. She didn't turn back. "Where's your horse?" Caleb asked. "I don't have one." "Then you'll ride with me." He led her to a black stallion tied behind the church. "Can you ride astride?" "I'll learn." He swung up first, then pulled her up behind him. Clara wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling the solid warmth of him, the weapons beneath his coat. This was madness. She was throwing away everything for a man she barely knew, a life she couldn't imagine. "No regrets?" he asked, as if reading her thoughts. She thought of Samuel's soft hands, her father's crushing certainty, the schoolhouse where she'd slowly suffocated for 2 years. "None." "Good. Hold tight." They rode out of Redemption Creek as the sun began its descent, painting the world in shades of gold and blood. Behind them, Clara could see townspeople gathering, pointing. By nightfall, everyone would know. The preacher's daughter had run off with the gunslinger, but as they climbed into the hills, the town shrinking below them, Clara felt only a wild exhilaration. The wind tasted of sage and possibility. Ahead, the mountains rose like promises, hiding roads that led everywhere and nowhere. She pressed her face against Caleb's back and smiled. For the first time in 2 years, for the first time in her life, she was truly awake. Let them talk. Let them judge. She'd chosen danger over safety, unknown over known. Just like her mother before her, she'd chosen to live. The mountains swallowed them as darkness fell, and Redemption Creek became just another ghost town in the making, another casualty of drought and human frailty. But Clara didn't look back. She was too busy looking forward, toward whatever dawn awaited them on the other side of the mountains. The sun hung low over Redemption Creek, painting the dust-choked streets in shades of copper and rust. Caleb McKenna rode in from the south, his black stallion's hooves raising small clouds with each step. 2 years of hard living had carved new lines into his face, and a fresh scar ran across his left knuckles, a souvenir from a disagreement in Amarillo. He'd sworn never to return to this place, but news traveled fast along the frontier, and when he'd heard about the troubles plaguing the town drought, bandits, fear thick as smoke, something had pulled him back. Something with storm-gray eyes and midnight hair. The town looked smaller than he remembered, meaner. Half the buildings stood empty, windows staring blind at the dying day. The few people on the streets hurried past without meeting his eyes. Though he felt their stares on his back, they knew him, or knew of him. The gunslinger who dared touch the preacher's daughter. Caleb tied his horse outside Murphy's livery, noting the new fortifications, barricades at either end of Main Street, sandbags piled beneath windows. The whole town felt like a powder keg waiting for a match. Well. Jake Murphy emerged from the shadows of the stable, older and grayer, but still built like a prize fighter. Caleb McKenna, heard you were dead. Disappointed? Murphy spat tobacco juice into the dust. Depends on why you're here. If it's for the girl, you're too late. She's spoken for. Caleb's jaw tightened. I'm here about the job. Heard Morrison's hiring guns. That's Kellerman's outfit now. They don't take to competition. Murphy's eyes narrowed. But you didn't ride all this way for $30 a month and found. Caleb didn't answer. He'd spent 2 years trying to forget Clara Whitmore in Mexican cantinas, Colorado mining camps, anywhere whiskey flowed and women smiled, but she haunted him like smoke, always there when he closed his eyes. That one night by the creek had ruined him for simple things. He left Murphy's and headed for the saloon. The dollar needed paint and new boards, but whiskey was whiskey. Inside, the air hung thick with smoke and tension. Kellerman's men occupied the best tables, hard-faced professionals who sized him up the moment he entered. Caleb ordered a bottle and found a corner table. He was halfway through his second glass when she walked past the saloon's grimy window. His breath caught. Clara moved like a ghost down the sidewalk, prim in her schoolteacher's dress, but somehow diminished. The fire, he remembered, had banked to embers. Behind her walked a soft-looking man in a banker's suit, his proprietary hand on her elbow. Samuel Hartley. Had to be. Caleb's fingers tightened on his glass. He'd known she would marry. Known a woman like Clara couldn't wait forever for a drifter who'd offered nothing but pretty words and impossible dreams. But knowing and seeing were different animals entirely. That's a man who likes pain. Caleb looked up. A woman stood beside his table. Not young, not old, with knowing eyes and a cynical smile. Dolly, if he remembered right, one of the saloon's working girls. Don't know what you mean. She laughed, sliding uninvited into the opposite chair. Any man who looks at Clara Whitmore that way is asking for hurt. She's marrying the Hartley boy next month. Big church wedding, if the town lasts that long. What's that supposed to mean? Dolly leaned closer, voice dropping. You really been gone 2 years? This place is dying. Cowboy, the drought's killing the land, Rebel Jack's killing the people, and fear's killing everything else. Half the town's already run. The rest are just too stubborn or too poor to leave. And Clara, trapped like a rabbit in a snare. Her daddy's sick consumption, though he won't admit it. Samuel Hartley's the only thing standing between her and destitution. Dolly's eyes softened slightly. She used to have spirit, that one. Used to look at the horizon like it was calling her name. Now she just looks at the ground. Caleb poured another drink, mind racing. He'd come back thinking, what? That she'd run away with him? That 2 years wouldn't have changed everything? Fool's dreams. All of it. You're him, aren't you? Dolly said suddenly. The one who turned her head that night. Murphy told me about running you out of town. Ancient history. Is it? She stood, smoothing her red dress. She walks by here every evening after school. Takes the long way home to avoid the church. Funny thing for a preacher's daughter to do. Dolly sauntered away, leaving Caleb alone with his whiskey and thoughts. Outside, the sun died behind the mountains, and shadows crept across the street like accusations. He waited. She came as the first stars appeared, moving slowly as if each step cost her. This close. He could see the changes more clearly, the fine lines around her eyes, the weary set of her shoulders. But when she paused outside the saloon, looking up at the emerging stars, he glimpsed the girl who'd sat beside him under the moon. Caleb stepped onto the sidewalk. Clara's head turned, and their eyes met. The world stopped. Hello, Clara. She went white, then red, then white again. Caleb. His name was barely a whisper. You're dead. They said you were dead. Takes more than rumors to kill me." She glanced around, panic flashing across her face. The street was empty, but windows had eyes in a town like this. "You can't be here. If Samuel sees, if Father, your father's the one who drove me out with guns and lies. Told me he'd see me hang if I came near you again." "I know." The admission seemed to pain her. "I found out later, after I'd already—" She gestured helplessly at her ring finger, where a modest gold band caught the lamplight. "You're not married yet." "I might as well be." Bitterness crept into her voice. "Where else would I go? What else would I do? Father's dying, the town's dying, everything's dying. At least Samuel offers security. In a cage." "Yes." She met his eyes squarely. "In a cage. But cages can be comfortable. Mr. McKenna, they can be safe." "Since when did you want safe?" "Since I spent 2 years waiting by a creek for a man who never came." The words burst out, sharp with old pain. "Since I learned that freedom's just another word for loneliness." Caleb stepped closer. She smelled of chalk dust and lavender soap, ordinary things that seemed exotic on her. "I wrote you, sent letters with every traveler heading this way. I never—" Understanding dawned on her face. "Father probably burned them. Man protects what's his, even if it kills the thing he's protecting." Clara's hand rose to her throat. In the lamplight, tears gathered in her eyes but didn't fall. "It doesn't matter now. You're too late." "Am I?" "Yes." But she didn't move away when he stepped closer. Didn't protest when his hand found hers. "Meet me," he said urgently. "Tonight. The old cottonwoods by the creek. The creek's dry. Everything's dry. Then we'll meet in the dust. Just talk. Clara, just let me see you again without the whole town watching." She looked at their joined hands, his dark and scarred, hers pale despite the frontier sun. "I can't. Samuel's joining us for dinner. Wedding plans." She laughed, a broken sound. "Did you know he's already picked out my dress? Ordered it from San Francisco. White silk, he says, befitting a virtuous bride." Caleb's free hand touched her face, thumb tracing the curve of her cheek. She leaned into the touch for just a moment before pulling away. "Don't," she whispered. "Please don't make this harder." "It's supposed to be hard. Means it matters. I have to go." But she lingered, searching his face. "Why did you come back? Really?" "You know why. The girl you knew is gone. Caleb. That dreamer who talked about oceans and freedom. She died sometime between the first broken promise and the 100th day of drought. I'm what's left. I don't believe that." "Then you're a fool." She pulled free, straightening her spine. "Goodbye, Mr. McKenna. I hope you find whatever you're looking for, but it isn't here." She walked away, back rigid, steps measured. Caleb watched until she turned the corner, then slammed his fist into the saloon wall. Pain flared across his scarred knuckles, but it was nothing compared to the ache in his chest. Inside the saloon, someone started playing a mournful tune on a battered piano. Caleb went back to his whiskey, but the burn couldn't wash away the memory of tears in storm-gray eyes. An hour later, Kellerman himself appeared, a tall man with dead eyes and expensive guns. He commanded the room just by entering. His gaze found Caleb, assessed, dismissed. "You're McKenna," he said, approaching the table. "Heard about you. Good with a gun, bad with authority. That about sums it up. I don't need another gun, got plenty, but I might have use for someone who knows the territory, knows how men like Rebel Jack think." Kellerman smiled without warmth. "Interested?" Caleb considered. He'd planned to ride out at dawn, leave this dying town to its fate, but Clara was still here, trapped in her cage, waiting for a marriage that would kill what was left of her spirit. "Maybe," he said finally. "What's the job?" "Scout work, ride the borderlands, track Morales and his bunch, find out where they're holed up, how many men they have, when they plan to hit." Kellerman dropped a leather pouch on the table. It landed with a heavy clink of gold coins. "That's just for listening. More if your information proves good." "And if I find them?" "Then we end them. Every last one." Kellerman's eyes glittered. This town hired me to solve their bandit problem. I intend to solve it permanent-like. Caleb pocketed the gold. When do I start? Tomorrow. Report back in a week. Kellerman turned to go, then paused. Oh, and McKenna. I know about you and the school teacher. That was 2 years ago. She's Hartley's woman now. Keep it that way, or we'll have a problem. After Kellerman left, Caleb ordered another bottle. The piano player had switched to something livelier, but it couldn't lift the mood. He drank steadily, watching the night deepen outside the windows. Near midnight, he gave up on sleep and walked out into the empty streets. His feet carried him without conscious thought to the church on the hill. It squatted against the stars, windows dark except for one, the parsonage study, where a lone lamp burned. As he watched, a shadow passed before the window. Clara's father, unable to sleep, wrestling with sermons or sickness or the slow death of his town. Caleb felt a moment's pity for the old man. He'd driven away his daughter's chance at happiness in the name of protection, and now she was marrying a man who'd drain her dry as surely as the drought had drained the creek. Movement caught his eye. A figure in white slipped from the parsonage side door, moving like a ghost through the garden. Clara, in her nightgown and wrapper, hair loose around her shoulders. She paused at the garden gate, looking up at the stars. Then, as if drawn by invisible strings, she began walking down the hill toward the creek. Caleb followed, keeping to shadows. She moved with purpose now, almost running, bare feet silent on the packed earth. At the creek bed, she stopped among the dying cottonwoods, moonlight turning her into something otherworldly. "I know you're there," she said without turning. "I could always feel when you were near." Caleb stepped into the open. "Couldn't sleep. Not for 2 years." She faced him, and he saw tears streaming down her face. "I lied before. The girl you knew isn't dead. She's just been buried so deep I thought I'd never find her again. Then you walked out of that saloon, and suddenly I could breathe. Clara, no, let me speak." She moved closer, white gown billowing in the night breeze. "I'm getting married in 3 weeks. Samuel's already furnishing our house, planning our children's names. Father performs the ceremony if he lives that long. Everyone's so pleased, the preacher's daughter making a respectable match. You don't have to, but I do." Her voice cracked. "Where would I go? Caleb, what would I do? I have no money, no family besides father, no skills but teaching children their letters. You talk of freedom like it's simple, but freedom requires choices, and I have none." Caleb caught her hands, stilling their frantic movement. "You have one choice. Come with me." "To what? A life running from town to town? Sleeping in the dirt, always looking over our shoulders? That's not freedom. That's just another kind of prison." "It's life, Clara, messy and dangerous and real." He pulled her closer, feeling her tremble. "I've got money saved, enough to start fresh somewhere. California, maybe, or Oregon. Somewhere with water and hope. And us. What would we be? Whatever we choose, that's what freedom means." She searched his face in the moonlight. The preacher's daughter shared one moonlit night. She whispered, "One perfect night when anything seemed possible. But dawn always comes, Caleb, and in the daylight, dreams look different. Then close your eyes." His hand cupped her face. "Just for tonight, close your eyes and dream with me again." She did, swaying into him like a flower seeking sun. When their lips met, it was like coming home after years of wandering. She tasted of tears and wishes, of everything he'd been running toward without knowing it. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Clara's eyes held a wildness he remembered. "I'll go with you," she said. "God help me, I'll go, but not tonight. There are things I need to, people I need to." She pressed her fingers to her lips. "Give me 3 days. Meet me here at midnight in 3 days. If I'm not here by dawn, ride on without me. Clara, promise me, if I don't come, you leave. Don't come looking, don't ask questions. Just ride. I promise." The lie came easily. He'd tear the town apart looking for her if she didn't show. She kissed him once more, fierce and desperate. then fled back up the hill. Caleb stood among the dead trees, watching until the parsonage door closed behind her. 3 days. He could give her that. He'd waited 2 years. What was 3 more days? Above, clouds gathered on the horizon, promising rain that would probably never fall. But for the first time in years, Caleb McKenna found himself hoping. The rebel cowboy had returned. And this time, he wouldn't leave empty-handed. This time, he'd either save Clara Whitmore or die trying. The first gunshots cracked across the morning air like thunder, jolting Clara from her desk at the schoolhouse. Through the window, she saw riders pouring down Main Street, 20, 30, more, their faces masked with bandanas, guns blazing. Rebel Jack's men had finally come. "Under the desks," Clara shouted, herding her students down. "Stay low and quiet," little Sarah Morrison began to cry. Clara pulled the girl close, feeling the child's heart racing against her chest. Outside, the thunder of hooves mixed with screams, breaking glass, the sharp report of rifles. Redemption Creek's day of reckoning had arrived. The schoolhouse door burst open. Clara's heart stopped, then resumed as she recognized Tom Bradley, the sheriff's deputy. Blood ran down his face from a gash above his eye. "Miss Clara, we need to get these young'uns to the church. It's built stronger. Got a root cellar?" A window exploded in a shower of glass. Clara threw herself over the nearest children as bullets whined overhead. When she looked up, Tom was slumped against the doorframe, red spreading across his shirt. "Children, follow me!" Clara grabbed Sarah with one arm, Timothy Edwards with the other. "Stay together, stay low." They ran through chaos. The general store burned, flames licking at the morning sky. Bodies lay in the street. She recognized Jake Murphy, Mrs. Henderson, others whose names blurred in the panic. Kellerman's men had formed a defensive line near the saloon, exchanging fire with the bandits, but they were outnumbered 3-1. Clara herded her students up the hill toward the church, trying to shield them from the worst sights. Behind them, an explosion rocked the town. The bank, she thought, or maybe the jail. Black smoke rolled across the sun. Her father stood at the church door, pale but steady, ushering people inside. "The cellar," he gasped between coughs. "Get them to the cellar." Clara led the children down the narrow stairs into darkness that smelled of earth and potatoes. Other families huddled there already, women clutching babies, old men gripping ancient rifles. She did a quick count. 12 children from her class of 20. She couldn't think about the others. Not yet. "Miss Whitmore." Widow Patterson gripped her arm. "My boy Daniel, he was at the livery. I'm sure he's fine." Clara lied smoothly. She'd seen the livery burning, horses screaming. "Stay here. I need to check upstairs." She climbed back to the church proper, where men had barricaded windows and taken firing positions. Through a gap in the boards, she could see the town dying. The bandits rode in circles, whooping like demons, setting fire to anything that would burn. Kellerman's defensive line had broken. His men scattered, some running for the hills, others making desperate last stands. And then she saw him. Caleb rode through the smoke like an avenging angel, both guns blazing. His black stallion danced between bullets, and every shot he fired found a target. He'd gathered a handful of townsmen and surviving guns for hire, leading them in a countercharge that momentarily scattered the bandits. Clara's hands pressed against the wood, splinters digging into her palms. 3 days, he'd said, but that was before hell came to Redemption Creek. "Get away from there." Samuel Hartley pulled her back, his face white with terror. "Are you mad? They'll see you." "Let go of me." Clara wrenched free. "We need to help them." "Help them? We need to hide until it's over." His hands shook as he gripped his rifle, a fancy piece that had probably never fired at anything but targets. "This isn't our fight. Clara, let the hired guns earn their pay." Disgust rose in her throat. "Those are our neighbors dying out there, and we'll join them if we're not careful." He grabbed her again, fingers digging into her arms. "You're going to be my wife. I won't let you—" The church door exploded inward. 3 bandits stood silhouetted against the burning town. rifles ready. The one in front, a scarred Mexican with gold teeth, smiled. Well, well, the house of God, full of lambs for slaughter? Samuel shoved Clara behind him, not protectively, she realized, but to clear his own path to the vestry door. He ran without looking back, leaving her standing exposed. Coward, one of the townsmen spat, but there was no time for more. The shooting started, deafening in the enclosed space. Clara dropped behind a pew as bullets chewed wood above her head. Someone screamed. Judge Morrison fell, clutching his stomach. Return fire from the townsmen caught one bandit in the chest, spinning him back through the door. But more were coming. Too many. Clara crawled toward the altar, thinking of the children below. If the bandits found the cellar. She grabbed a fallen pistol, heavy and unfamiliar in her hands. Her father had taught her that violence was never the answer, but her father was dying of consumption while better men bled in the streets. A figure burst through the side door. Caleb, face streaked with gunpowder and blood. His eyes found hers across the chaos. Clara, down! She flattened as his guns roared. Two bandits tumbled backwards. Caleb vaulted over pews, reaching her in 3 strides, pulling her against the altar's solid bulk. Are you hurt? No, the children. In the cellar. I know. Tom Bradley told me before he died. Caleb checked his ammunition, face grim. We're holding them for now. But Rebel Jack's got 50 men, maybe 60. We can't. The front windows exploded. Fire bottles, whiskey, and kerosene shattered against the pews. Flames spread with hungry speed, fed by dry wood and years of prayer books. Everyone out. Clara's father appeared, half carrying a wounded woman. The church is lost. The cellar. Clara started for the stairs, but Caleb caught her. I'll get them. You help the wounded. He pressed one of his guns into her hands. Anyone tries to stop you, use this. He vanished into the smoke. Clara helped her father drag the wounded toward the back exit, the heat growing unbearable. The beautiful church, where she'd spent countless hours in prayer and contemplation, was becoming a crematorium. Families poured from the cellar, Caleb shepherding them like a deadly guardian. He carried Sarah Morrison in one arm, his free hand fanning his gun, watching for threats. Clara's students stumbled out, coughing, terrified but alive. They spilled into the churchyard as the roof caught. The cemetery that had seemed morbid to Clara now offered cover headstones and monuments to hide behind, while bullets whined overhead. Make for the hills, someone shouted. Scatter. But Rebel Jack had thought of that. Riders circled the town's edges, cutting down anyone who tried to flee. They wanted more than plunder. They wanted annihilation. This way. Caleb led a group toward a dried creek bed that offered some protection. Clara followed, still clutching the unfamiliar pistol, trying to shield the children. Behind them, the church collapsed in a roar of flames and timber. Her father stumbled, coughing blood. Father! She caught him as he fell, his weight nearly dragging her down. Caleb appeared at her side, lifting the old man with surprising gentleness. Leave me, her father gasped. Save the children. We're saving everyone, Caleb said firmly. He half carried, half dragged the Reverend to the relative safety of the creek bed, where other survivors huddled. The battle raged for another hour. Caleb organized the surviving men into a defensive position, turning the creek bed into a makeshift fort. Clara tended wounded with torn petticoats and prayers, trying not to see how young some of the bodies were. Then, as suddenly as it began, the shooting stopped. An eerie quiet settled over the burning town, broken only by the crackle of flames and moans of the dying. Clara peered over the creek bank. The bandits were pulling back, loaded with plunder, driving stolen cattle before them. But one rider remained, sitting his horse in the middle of Main Street, even at a distance. Clara could see the silver conchos on his jacket, the rifle cradled across his saddle. Rebel Jack Morales himself. McKenna! His voice carried clearly in the still air. Caleb McKenna. I know you're there. Amigo! Beside her, Caleb tensed. Stay down, he told Clara, checking his guns. You don't know him. I know him. His face was stone. We rode together once. Long time ago, before he turned bad. McKenna, Rebel Jack called again. You picked the wrong side. Compadre, but I'm feeling generous. You ride out now, I let you go. Stay, and you burn with the rest. Caleb stood slowly, exposing himself above the creek bank. Jack! The bandit leader laughed. Still alive. You always were hard to kill. What do you say? For old times? These people are under my protection now. Your protection? Rebel Jack's voice hardened. Like you protected that family in Sonora. Oh wait, you ran that time, didn't you? Left them to burn while you saved your own skin. Clara looked at Caleb, seeing new shadows in his eyes. He'd never spoken of Sonora, of whatever had driven him to become the man he was. That was different, Caleb said quietly. Was it? The bandit leader shifted his rifle. Always running, aren't you, McKenna? Running from what you are, what you've done. Well, run now. Last chance. No. Then you'll burn with your new friends. Vaya con Dios, compadre. Rebel Jack wheeled his horse and galloped after his men. As he crested the hill, he turned and fired. Not at Caleb, but at something in town. A moment later, another explosion rocked Redemption Creek, the powder store. Clara realized the whole town would burn now. Caleb slid back down into the creek bed. We need to move. Fire's going to spread this way. What did he mean? Clara asked. About Sonora? Later. His face was closed, locked. If we live through this, I'll tell you everything. Right now, we need to get these people to safety. They organized the survivors, maybe 40 souls out of a town of 200. Clara's father could barely walk, leaning heavily on Samuel Hartley, who'd reappeared with his tail between his legs. The banker's son wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. They climbed into the hills as Redemption Creek burned behind them. The town that had been dying slowly from drought now died quickly from fire and lead. Clara looked back once, seeing the schoolhouse collapse, the general store already ashes. Everything she'd known, everything that had defined her life, was gone. Don't look back, Caleb said softly. He'd given his horse to carry wounded, walking beside her. Never does any good. Where will we go? There's a mining camp about 20 miles north. Telegraph there. They can send for help. He studied the exhausted group. Going to be a hard walk. Some might not make it. Clara looked at her father, gray-faced and wheezing, at the wounded leaving blood trails in the dust, at the children who'd aged years and hours. Then she looked at Caleb, who'd fought like 10 men to save people who'd once driven him out. We'll make it, she said. We have to. He smiled then, that crooked grin she remembered. There's the Clara I knew, still in there after all. The preacher's daughter is dead, she said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. I don't know what I am now. Free, he said simply. Terrible price, but free. They walked through the afternoon heat, a ragged line of survivors from a dead town. Behind them, smoke rose like a monument to all they'd lost. Ahead, the mountains offered uncertain sanctuary. Clara walked between her dying father and the man she'd chosen, leaving burning bridges in her wake. The rebel cowboy had returned, just as the old woman foretold, but he hadn't brought salvation. He'd brought her something better, a chance to save herself. The sun was setting when they finally stopped to rest, painting the sky the color of blood and redemption. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new choices. But for now, Clara Whitmore, no longer the preacher's daughter, not yet anything else, was simply alive, in a world of drought and violence. That was miracle enough. The rocky outcropping offered little shelter, but it was defensible. Caleb positioned the men with rifles along the ridge while Clara tended the wounded in a shallow cave below. The sun hammered down mercilessly, and their water was running low. 2 canteens for 40 people, including children. They're coming. Will Patterson, the widow's son who'd survived the livery fire, pointed toward the dust cloud rising from the valley. Maybe 10 riders. Caleb studied the approaching horsemen through field glasses he'd taken from a dead bandit. Not Rebel Jack's men, moving too organized. He lowered the glasses, jaw tight. It's Kellerman. That's good, isn't it? Will asked. They're on our side. Boy, men like Kellerman aren't on anyone's side but their own. Caleb checked his Colts, a gesture Clara had seen him make 100 times in the past 2 days. Get word to the others. No one shows themselves until I say. Clara climbed up beside him, her once white dress now torn and stained beyond recognition. What's wrong? If it's Kellerman. Think about it. Town's destroyed. Most witnesses dead. What's to stop him from finishing the job? Claiming Rebel Jack did it all? Caleb's eyes never left the approaching riders. Dead men tell no tales, and Morrison's gold is probably melted slag by now. No one to pay him. No one to complain if he disappears. The riders stopped just out of rifle range. Kellerman himself rode forward, hands visible but near his guns. McKenna, I see you up there. Let's talk. Talk from there. Caleb called back. Now, that's not friendly. We're all on the same side here. Are we? Where were you when the town burned? Kellerman's laugh was cold as winter wind. Fighting, same as you. Lost 6 men trying to hold the bank. Rebel Jack hit us hard. Convenient. Those 6 men can't contradict you. You calling me a liar? McKenna? Clara saw Caleb's finger move to his trigger guard. The air crackled with tension thick as the heat. Below, she could hear children whimpering, their mothers trying to quiet them. I'm saying, Caleb said carefully, that we've got wounded here. Women and children. They need water and medical attention, not more gunplay. Then come down. We'll escort you to Tucson. No. Kellerman shifted in his saddle, being unreasonable. McKenna, these people need help. You plan to let them die on this rock out of pride? Clara touched Caleb's arm. Maybe we should. No. His voice was stone. I know men like him. Clara, seen what they do when the badges come off. He raised his voice. We'll make our own way. Kellerman, ride on. Can't do that. See, Judge Morrison hired me to protect this town. Town's gone, but the people are still my responsibility. Kellerman's hand moved slightly. One way or another, they're coming with me. The shot came from below. Samuel Hartley, panicking, firing wild. His bullet kicked up dust 10 feet from Kellerman's horse, but it was enough. The hired guns scattered, seeking cover, returning fire that sent rock chips flying. Hold fire! Caleb roared, but chaos had already erupted. The defenders shot desperately at shadows while Kellerman's men worked around their flanks with professional precision. Clara half fell, half slid back to the cave where her father lay. His breathing was wet, labored. Blood flecked his lips with each cough. Clara, his hand found hers, cold despite the heat. I was wrong. Don't talk. Save your strength. No, listen. His gray eyes, so like her own, held depths of pain beyond the physical. Your mother, I drove her away with my righteousness, my fear, tried to cage her, just like I tried to cage you. Father, that man, McKenna, he's rough, dangerous, everything I taught you to avoid. A ghost of a smile touched his cracked lips. But he came back. He's fighting for strangers, for people who scorned him. That's true Christianity, daughter. Not my sermons, not my rules. His actions... Gunfire intensified above. Someone screamed. Clara couldn't tell which side. She gripped her father's hand tighter. If we survive this, he whispered. Go with him. Live, Clara, really live. For both of us. His hand went slack. Clara pressed her ear to his chest, heard nothing but silence. Reverend Josiah Whitmore had preached his last sermon. Clara, Caleb's voice, urgent. Need you up here. She closed her father's eyes, whispering a prayer that felt different from any she'd said before, not asking for salvation, but giving thanks for understanding, however late it came. Then she grabbed the medical supplies and climbed back to the battle. Will Patterson was down, clutching a bloody shoulder. 2 other defenders weren't moving at all. Kellerman's men had worked closer, using superior tactics and ammunition. It was only a matter of time. Can you use that? Caleb nodded at the pistol still tucked in her belt. If I have to. Might have to. He was bleeding from a graze on his temple, but his hands were steady as he reloaded. They're going to rush us soon. When they do, thunder rolled across the clear sky. Not thunder, hoofbeats. Dozens of horses, coming fast from the north. A cavalry troop crested the ridge, guidons snapping in the wind. And Clara had never seen anything more beautiful than those dust-covered soldiers in blue. "Kellerman!" The cavalry captain's voice rang with authority. "Stand down, by order of Colonel Morrison, 6th Cavalry." Clara saw Kellerman's face twist with rage, then smooth into a professional mask. His men lowered their weapons. Suddenly just hired security again. "Captain Brewster," Kellerman called. "Thank God you're here. We were trying to rescue these folks from bandits." "Save it for the inquiry." Brewster was young, but had eyes that had seen too much. "We've been tracking Rebel Jack since the raid. Saw the smoke. Figured Redemption Creek was hit." He looked up at the defenders. "You folks all right up there?" "Got wounded," Caleb called back. "Need water and medical attention." "You'll have it." Brewster turned back to Kellerman. "You and your men will accompany us to Fort Grant. The colonel has questions about your activities in the territory. We were hired legally. I said save it." The captain's tone brooked no argument. "Sergeant, disarm these men." As the cavalry took control, Clara found herself sitting on a rock, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. The last 2 days crashed over her like a flood. Her father dead, her town destroyed, her old life burned to ash. She'd killed men. She remembered pulling the trigger when bandits tried to rush the creek bed. Seeing one fall, the Clara who'd read scripture in a dusty church would have been horrified. This Clara felt only numbness. "Here." Caleb pressed a canteen into her hands. Cavalry brought water. She drank deeply, tasting life in every drop. "Father's dead. I know. I'm sorry." He gave us his blessing. At the end, she looked up at him, said I should go with you. Caleb knelt beside her, his hand covering hers on the canteen. "Clara, what I said before about starting fresh. I need you to know something first. About Sonora." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." His eyes were haunted. "I was younger, wilder. Rode with men like Rebel Jack before they turned full bad. We hired on to protect a ranch family from Apache raids. Good people, man. Wife, 3 daughters." He stopped, jaw working. "Apache never came, but bandits did. Men I'd ridden with before, led by Jack. They wanted me to join them, help take the ranch." Clara waited, seeing him gather the words like bullets. "I refused. They laughed, said they'd do it without me. I could have fought, could have warned the family, helped them run. Instead, I rode out, told myself it wasn't my business, wasn't my fight." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Found out later they killed everyone. Even the youngest girl couldn't have been more than 6. "Caleb, I've been running from that ever since. Town to town, fight to fight, trying to balance the scales. But some things can't be balanced." He met her eyes. "That's who you'd be riding with. Clara, a man who let children die because he was afraid." Clara studied his face, weathered, scarred, carrying weight that would never lift. She thought of her father, dying with regret for chances not taken. Of Samuel, running while others fought. Of herself, accepting a cage because it seemed safer than flying. "The man I'd be riding with," she said slowly, "came back to a town that drove him out, fought for people who despised him, saved children from burning churches and faced down 50 bandits." She touched his face, feeling stubble and dried blood. "We all carry our dead. Caleb, question is whether we let them bury us too." He caught her hand, pressed it to his cheek. "You sure? Life with me won't be easy." "No churches, no schools, no respectable society. I've had respectable. It nearly killed me." She managed a smile. "Besides, someone needs to teach you proper table manners. Can't have you eating with your guns on forever." His laugh was shaky but real. "Deal, though I make no promises about the guns." Captain Brewster approached, spurs jingling. "Ma'am, sir, we're ready to move out, taking everyone to Fort Grant for now. There's a town nearby, Silver Creek. Folks can figure out where to go from there." He paused. "I'm sorry about Redemption Creek. Heard it was a nice town once." "It was dying anyway," Clara said. "Just took longer than expected." They descended from the rocks, Caleb helping her over the rough spots. The survivors were loading onto cavalry horses and supply wagons. Samuel Hartley sat in one wagon, still clutching his fancy rifle, trying to avoid everyone's eyes. When he saw Clara, he looked away quickly. She felt nothing. No anger, no contempt. Just a vague pity for a man who'd shown his true colors when tested. Her engagement ring was somewhere in the ashes of Redemption Creek, and good riddance. They laid her father's body in a wagon with the other dead, to be buried properly at Fort Grant. Clara kissed his forehead one last time, then let him go. He'd found peace at the end. That was more than many got. As the column formed up, Caleb brought his black stallion. "Ride with me?" Clara had ridden behind him once before, fleeing everything she'd known. This time, she swung up without hesitation, sitting astride like the improper woman she'd become, her torn dress rode up, showing her legs, scandalous, free. "Where will we go?" she asked as they started north. "Fort Grant first, then—" He shrugged. "West, maybe. Heard there's good land in Oregon, green and wet, or south to Mexico. If you want to see different country, worlds wide, Clara, we can go anywhere. Together, if you'll have me. We could find a preacher at the fort, make it proper." "No." The word surprised them both. "That is, not yet. I've been the preacher's daughter, the school teacher, almost the banker's wife. I want to be just Clara for a while. Figure out who that is." Caleb twisted in the saddle to look at her. "That's the bravest thing I've heard you say, or the most foolish. Sometimes they're the same thing." They rode in comfortable silence, the cavalry column winding through hills that grew greener as they climbed. Behind them, smoke still rose from Redemption Creek, but Clara didn't look back. Her father was dead, her old life burned, her reputation in ruins. By all the standards she'd been raised with, she'd lost everything. So why did she feel so alive? As they crested a ridge, Caleb pointed ahead. "Look!" Clouds were massing on the horizon, real ones heavy with moisture. The wind carried the scent of rain, sweet as salvation. As Clara watched, lightning flickered in the distance, and thunder rolled across the sky like a promise. "Rain," she breathed. "Finally. Too late for Redemption Creek, but not for us." She tightened her arms around his waist, feeling his solid warmth, his strength that had nothing to do with the guns he carried. "Not for us." The first fat drops fell as they descended toward Fort Grant, washing the dust from their faces, the blood from their clothes, the past from their futures. Clara lifted her face to the sky, laughing as the drops became a downpour. The preacher's daughter had shared one moonlit night with temptation and found herself. The rebel cowboy had returned and discovered redemption in the most unlikely place. Together, they rode into the storm, into the unknown, into a life that would be hard and dangerous and gloriously, terrifyingly free. Behind them, Redemption Creek died in fire and rain. Ahead, the whole world waited, washed clean and new as forgiveness. Clara pressed her cheek against Caleb's back and smiled. She'd lost everything she'd been taught to value: respectability, security, certainty. She'd never been happier in her life. Fort Grant sprawled across the valley like a promise of civilization, its adobe walls and wooden buildings a stark contrast to the wilderness beyond. For 3 days, the survivors of Redemption Creek had sheltered here while the cavalry pursued Rebel Jack's scattered forces. Now, as dawn painted the mountains gold, decisions had to be made. Clara stood at the cemetery gate, where fresh mounds marked yesterday's burials. Her father's grave bore a simple wooden cross. Reverend Josiah Whitmore, 1832 to 1879, he found peace at last. She'd insisted on those last words, knowing he'd understand. "The sutler's wagon leaves in an hour," Samuel Hartley said behind her. She didn't turn. I've secured passage to Tucson. From there, the railroad to San Francisco. Father's bank has branches there. We could still... No, Clara, be reasonable. What happened at Redemption Creek? The fear, the chaos, anyone might have reacted poorly. It doesn't define a man. Now she did turn, studying the banker's son with something approaching pity. His fine clothes had been replaced with cavalry cast-offs, but he still carried himself like money could solve any problem. You're right, she said. One moment doesn't define a man, but it reveals him. I saw who you are, Samuel. More importantly, I saw who I am. And what is that? A gunslinger's woman? You'll end up in some mining camp, old before your time, waiting for him to come home from the next fight. His voice turned nasty. That's if he doesn't leave you for younger prey once the novelty wears off. Maybe. Or maybe we'll build something new together. Either way, it's my choice to make. She walked away, leaving him standing among the graves. Let him go to San Francisco. Find some proper girl who'd never seen him run. Clara had more important things to consider. The fort's modest chapel had been converted to a makeshift hospital. Clara found Caleb there, helping to build coffins for those who hadn't survived their wounds. Manual labor came naturally to him. She'd noticed. His hands were as comfortable with hammer and saw as with guns. Samuel's leaving, she said. Good riddance. He set down his hammer, wiping sweat from his brow. You all right? Better than all right. She studied him. This man she'd chosen. The morning light revealed new details. A thin scar across his knuckles, the way his hair curled slightly at his collar, the patient gentleness as he helped an elderly woman to a chair. Where's your horse? Stable. Why? Because I want to see the sunrise from somewhere that isn't surrounded by walls. They rode out as the fort stirred to life, past sentries who knew better than to question Caleb McKenna's comings and goings. The land here was different from Redemption Creek greener, fed by mountain streams that hadn't dried up. Birds called from cottonwoods, and the air smelled of sage and possibility. They stopped at a creek that actually held water, dismounting to let the horse drink. Clara sat on a fallen log, watching the sun climb higher, painting the world in shades of gold and green. I've been thinking, she said. Dangerous habit? She smiled. About what comes next. Everyone assumes we'll drift, town to town. And you're hiring out your gun. She looked at him. Is that what you want? Caleb skipped a stone across the water, considering. It's what I know. What I've done for 10 years. But is it what you want? He was quiet for a long moment. I used to think I was looking for something. Redemption. Maybe. For Sonora. Or just the next fight, the next dollar. But sitting here with you. He turned to face her. Maybe I was just looking for home. We could build one. A real home, not just a stopping place between gunfights. Where? The captain mentioned homestead land opening up near Silver Creek. Good soil, water rights included. The Army's keeping it peaceful. She took a breath. I have some money. Not much, teacher's savings, but enough for a start. Farming. Caleb's expression was skeptical. You see me behind a plow. I see you building something instead of destroying it. I see us raising horses. You know them better than anyone. Maybe some cattle. A garden. Her voice softened. Children, eventually, if you want. He pulled her close, and she felt him tremble slightly. You know I've got enemies. Men who'd come looking if they heard Caleb McKenna had gone soft, settled down. Then maybe Caleb McKenna disappears, becomes someone else. John Williams, horse rancher, David Johnson, family man. She smiled against his chest. Though I'd recommend keeping the guns handy, whoever you become. Clara Whitmore, proposing we live in sin under false names. What would your father say? He'd say I was finally living. She pulled back to look at him. We could marry properly if you want. Find a judge in Silver Creek. No. He cupped her face in his hands. You were right before. We both need time to figure out who we are when we're not running or fighting or meeting other people's expectations. But Clara, his thumb traced her cheekbone, When we do marry, and we will, I want it to be because we choose it free and clear, not because it's proper or expected." She kissed him then, there by the water with the sun warm on their faces and the future spread before them like an unmapped trail. When they returned to the fort, they found organized chaos. The survivors were splitting up, some heading to Tucson, others to California, a few planning to stay and help build Silver Creek into something more than a mining camp. "You'll need supplies," Will Patterson said. His shoulder was still bandaged, but his eyes were clear. "Ma and I are taking the sutler's wagon to Tucson, but we set aside some things. Figured you might not be leaving with the others." The things turned out to be practical gifts from grateful survivors. Blankets, tools, seeds for planting, even a Dutch oven from Widow Morrison. "Judge would have wanted you to have it," she said, pressing it into Clara's hands. "You saved my grandchildren. That's worth more than all his gold." Captain Brewster found them loading a borrowed wagon. "Heard you're staying in the territory." "Thinking about it," Caleb said carefully. "Good. We need solid people rebuilding after this mess." The captain handed over a sealed envelope. "Letter of recommendation. Any trouble with local law, this should clear it up. Far as the Army's concerned, you're both heroes of the Redemption Creek massacre." "We're no heroes," Clara said. "Ma'am, you kept 12 children alive through hell and gunfire." "That's heroic enough for me." He touched his hat brim. "Good luck to you both." They left that afternoon, wagon loaded with donated supplies and purchased essentials. Clara had traded her torn dress for practical clothing, split skirt for riding, sturdy boots, a hat to keep off the sun. Scandalous by her old standards, necessary for her new life. Silver Creek lay 2 days north, and they took their time. The first night, they camped under stars so bright they seemed touchable. Caleb taught her to read the constellations, pointing out the hunter, the bear, the swan flying eternally south. "Never had much schooling," he admitted. "But my mother loved the stars, said they were God's library, full of stories for those who could read them." "Tell me about her." So he did. There in the darkness with coyotes singing in the distance, about a schoolteacher who'd married a dreamer, followed him west chasing gold that never materialized. About watching her die of fever when he was 12, his father already gone, lost to whiskey and wandering. "That's when I started drifting," he said. "Figured if I kept moving, nothing could hurt like that again. And now I think maybe standing still takes more courage than running." The second day brought them through a thunderstorm that washed the world clean. They sheltered in a grove of oaks, watching lightning dance across the peaks while rain drummed on the wagon's canvas. Clara had never felt so alive, so present in her own skin. Silver Creek, when they finally saw it, wasn't much. A dozen buildings clustered around a muddy main street, mountains rising behind like protective walls. But the valley beyond showed promise: green grass, actual water in the creek, soil that looked like it would grow more than despair. They found the land office in a building that doubled as saloon and courthouse. The clerk, a thin man with ink-stained fingers, brightened when they asked about homestead claims. "Got a nice quarter section about 3 miles out, creek access, some bottom land for planting. Previous claimant gave up after a month, said it was too much work." He peered at them over his spectacles. "You folks farmers?" "We're learners," Clara said firmly. "How much?" They signed the papers as C. McKenna and C. Whitmore, letting the clerk assume what he would about their relationship. The claim was theirs for the proving 5 years to build something lasting or lose it all. The land, when they saw it, took Clara's breath away. A valley folded into the hills like a secret, with cottonwoods marking the creek's path and grassland stretching toward timbered slopes. The previous claimant had started a cabin 1 room, roughly built but solid. "It's perfect," Clara breathed. "It's work," Caleb corrected, but he was smiling. "Hard work." "You sure about this?" "I've never been sure of anything in my life." They spent the rest of the day exploring their kingdom, 160 acres that belonged to them if they could prove up. Clara found a spot for a garden, rich soil near the creek. Caleb studied the grassland with a horseman's eye, already planning where to build corrals. That night, in the rough cabin with rain pattering on the roof, they made plans, practical things, what to plant, what to build first, how to stretch their money through the first year, but dreams too, a real house eventually, with windows facing the sunrise, children laughing in the yard, neighbors coming for Sunday dinner. "I'll need to take some work at first," Caleb said. "Not gunfighting. I'm done with that if I can be. But there's always need for men who know horses, can break broncs or guide hunting parties. And I can teach. Silver Creek will need a school soon." Clara traced patterns on his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady. "We'll make it work. Together. Together." They didn't speak of love. The words seemed too small for what was building between them. Instead, they showed it in touches and glances, in shared laughter and comfortable silence, in the choice to stay when leaving would be easier. A week later, with the cabin chinked against wind and a garden plot turned, Clara stood in what would be her dooryard. The sunrise painted their valley gold and green and perfect. Behind her, she heard Caleb working on the corral, whistling something that might have been a hymn. She thought of her father, buried at Fort Grant with his regrets and late-blooming wisdom, of her mother, who'd chosen freedom and paid the price, of the girl she'd been, reading scripture in a dying town, dreaming of oceans she'd never see. That girl was gone, burned away with Redemption Creek. In her place stood a woman who'd chosen her own path, hard as it might be. Clara touched the pistol at her hip. She still carried it, probably always would. The frontier demanded that even dreams be defended. "Coffee's ready," Caleb called. She turned back to the cabin, to the man she'd chosen, to the life they were building nail by nail, seed by seed. The old Clara would have called this exile, punishment for sin. The new Clara knew better. This wasn't exile. This was coming home. The sun climbed higher, blessing their valley with light and warmth. Somewhere beyond the mountains, the world went on with its violence and sorrow. But here, in this fold of earth they'd claimed, something new was beginning. Clara smiled and went inside, where coffee waited and work beckoned and love grew sturdy as the cabin walls. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Fence posts to set, crops to tend, a life to build from scratch. She could hardly wait. The first drops of rain began at dawn, gentle as a blessing on the tin roof they'd installed just last week. Clara woke to the sound, smiling before she even opened her eyes. After months of building, planting, and praying, the rains had finally come to their valley. "You awake?" Caleb's voice was rough with sleep, his arm tightening around her waist. "Listen," she whispered. "Rain?" They lay there together, savoring the sound that meant their corn might survive, their pasture would green, their dreams had a chance. Through the window, real glass, shipped from Tucson at considerable expense, Clara could see their land drinking in the moisture like a thirsting man. 3 months had passed since they'd claimed this quarter section, 3 months of back-breaking work that had transformed both the land and themselves. Caleb's hands, once quick only for guns, had learned the rhythm of hammer and saw. Clara's, soft from years of only holding chalk and prayer books, now bore calluses from hoe and rope. "School committee's coming today," she reminded him. Still think it's too soon. Silver Creek barely has 20 families. 23, counting the Martinezes who arrived last week, and 17 children who need education. She turned in his arms, facing him. "Besides, teaching is what I know. We need the money." It was true. Their savings had dwindled faster than expected, eaten by lumber and nails, seed and stock. Caleb had taken work breaking horses for the army, sometimes gone for days at a stretch. They needed Clara's potential salary from the town. "I still don't like you riding to town alone, not with Kellerman still on the loose." She finished his thought. The hired gun had escaped custody during transfer, vanishing into the territory with a handful of his men. Reports placed him everywhere and nowhere, a ghost nursing grudges. "I'll be careful. Besides, I'm armed. Caleb's fingers traced the scar on her palm, the one from that night 2 years ago when she'd first grasped barbed wire, fleeing her father's house to meet him. Being armed and being ready to kill are different things. I've killed before. The words came steady. Matter of fact. The old Clara would have been horrified at her calm acceptance of this truth. In the heat of battle, defending children, it's different when it's calculated. When you see it coming. His eyes, that whiskey color she'd fallen into, held shadows. Changes you. We're already changed. She kissed him softly. Now come on. If the committee's coming, I need to look respectable, or at least clean. They rose and began their day's work, moving in the easy rhythm of partners who'd learned each other's patterns. Caleb tended the horses, 3 mares and a stallion, the beginning of their breeding program. Clara fed chickens, collected eggs, checked the garden where beans climbed poles and squash sprawled between corn rows. The rain continued, steady and life-giving. Clara found herself humming as she worked, an old hymn from her father's church. She'd thought she was done with religion when Redemption Creek burned, but here in this valley, watching life spring from earth they'd worked with their own hands, she'd found a different kind of faith, not in rules and rigid doctrine, but in cycles of seed and harvest, in the holiness of honest work, in the grace found between 2 people building something together. By noon, when the school committee arrived, the rain had softened to mist. Clara had transformed herself into something approximating a proper school marm clean dress, hair pinned up, chalk dust strategically placed on her sleeves to suggest experience. Only the pistol on her hip spoiled the image, but this was still the frontier. Even school teachers went armed. The committee consisted of 3 men, Harold Watson, who ran the general store, Dr. Marcus Finch, the town's only medical man, and, surprisingly, Captain Brewster from Fort Grant, apparently now retired and investing in Silver Creek's future. Mrs. McKenna, Watson began, then caught himself. I mean, Miss Whitmore, or is it Miss Whitmore for teaching purposes? Clara said smoothly. She and Caleb still hadn't married officially, though everyone assumed they had. It seemed a small rebellion against propriety, a reminder that they chose each other daily rather than being bound by law. Your credentials are impressive. Doctor, Finch said, reviewing her papers, 2 years teaching in Redemption Creek before the unpleasantness. The massacre, Clara corrected gently. No need to soften it. My students and I survived because we faced the truth of what was happening, not because we pretended it was something else. Captain Brewster smiled slightly. That's what we need here. Truth. Preparation. The territory's settling, but it's still dangerous. We need teachers who can educate our children and protect them if necessary. I can do both. They asked the expected questions about curriculum, discipline, her views on education. Clara answered honestly, describing her belief that frontier children needed practical knowledge alongside their letters, how to read animal signs as well as books, how to calculate odds of survival as well as sums. One concern, Watson said finally, your domestic situation. Some of the more traditional families might object to an unwed woman teaching their children. Then they're free to educate their children themselves. Clara said calmly, I'm offering my skills and experience. Take them or leave them, but don't presume to judge my choices. The men exchanged glances. It was Brewster who spoke. When can you start? Monday, if you have a suitable space. The old assay office will do for now. We're planning a proper schoolhouse by next year. He stood, offering his hand like she was a man. Welcome to Silver Creek, Miss Whitmore. Try not to shoot any students. After they left, Clara found Caleb in the barn, working leather for a new bridle. He looked up at her approach, reading her face. You got it. I got it. She couldn't contain her smile. $15 a month, plus supplies. It'll help. Caleb, it'll help so much. He set down his work, pulling her onto his lap. I'm proud of you. though I notice you didn't correct their assumption about your marital status. Would you rather I had? Told them we're living in sin. Shocking their delicate sensibilities? No. His hand curved around her neck, thumb stroking her pulse. I like our sin just fine. They were interrupted by hoofbeats. A rider coming fast. Caleb was on his feet instantly, hand moving to his gun. Old habits died hard, or maybe never died at all. But it was Will Patterson who burst into view, his horse lathered with sweat. Caleb! Miss Clara! Thank God you're here! We need help! They got him inside, poured water down him until he could speak clearly. It's Kellerman. He hit the Donovan farm last night, killed Sean, took Margaret and the girls. Left a message. Caleb's face had gone stone. What message? Will pulled out a piece of paper, hands shaking. Clara read it over Caleb's shoulder, feeling ice form in her veins. McKenna, you took what was mine at Redemption Creek. Now I take what's yours. Bring $5,000 to Skeleton Canyon in 3 days, or I start sending back pieces of the Donovan women. Come alone. Kay, we don't have $5,000, Clara said. Nobody in Silver Creek does. He knows that. Caleb's voice was flat. This isn't about money. It's about drawing me out, finishing what we started. Then we get the sheriff, form a posse. No. Caleb was already moving, checking his guns, gathering ammunition. A posse will get those women killed. Kellerman's smart, careful. He'll have watchers out, escape routes planned. You can't go alone. That's what he wants. He stopped, framing her face with his hands. Clara, listen. The Donovans have 3 daughters. Oldest is maybe 14. You know what men like Kellerman do to girls that age? She did know. The frontier newspapers were full of such horrors. Then I'm coming with you. No. Yes. She pulled free, moving to get her own weapon. You taught me to shoot. I've proven I can fight, and 2 guns are better than 1. Clara, those could be my students. Caleb, those girls could be sitting in my classroom Monday morning if we save them. She checked her pistol's loads with hands that barely trembled. We're partners, in everything. Will looked between them. I'll come too. And Tom Bradley, and... No. Caleb's tone brooked no argument. You ride to Fort Grant. Tell them what's happened. If we're not back in 4 days, they'll know where to find our bodies. But, go, Will, now. After the boy left, they prepared in silence. Ammunition, water, food for 3 days hard riding. Clara changed into her riding clothes, strapped on the gun belt Caleb had made her. When she looked in their small mirror, she barely recognized herself. The preacher's daughter was truly dead, replaced by this hard-eyed woman who could kill to protect what she loved. They rode out as the sun touched the western peaks, turning the rain-washed world to gold. The cabin looked so peaceful in the evening light, smoke rising from the chimney, garden gleaming with moisture, paradise carved from wilderness, and they were leaving it to ride into hell. Whatever happens, Clara said as they climbed the trail, I don't regret any of it, not leaving with you, not building this life, not riding with you now. Save the goodbyes until we need them. But he reached over, squeezed her hand. Those same goes for me. Best 3 months of my life. Clara Whitmore. Worth whatever comes. They rode through the night, stopping only to rest the horses. Skeleton Canyon lay 2 days south, a maze of arroyos and hidden trails where outlaws had sheltered since Apache days. Clara dozed in the saddle, trusting Caleb to guide them, waking when he stopped to study the ground by moonlight. Tracks, he said quietly. 6 horses, maybe 7, moving fast but not running. They feel safe. How long ago? This morning, maybe noon. He swung back into the saddle. We're gaining. Dawn found them in rough country, red rock and thorny ocotillo. Beauty and danger intertwined. They stopped at a seep to water the horses, sharing jerky and hard biscuits, not talking about what lay ahead. It was then they heard the scream. High, terrified, young, coming from beyond a ridge of jumbled boulders. Caleb and Clara exchanged one look, then moved. They left the horses, approaching on foot. Guns drawn. Below. in a natural amphitheater of stone. Kellerman's camp sprawled beside a dying fire. Clara counted 5 men, all armed, most still rolling out of blankets. The Donovan women huddled together near the rocks, Margaret trying to shield her daughters, the youngest girl's face buried in her mother's skirts, and Kellerman himself standing over the oldest girl, belt in his hand. "Crying won't help," he was saying conversationally. "In fact, it just makes things more interesting." Caleb's shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him around. The camp erupted in chaos, men scrambling for weapons, shouting contradictions. Clara sighted on a man raising a rifle toward their position. Squeezed the trigger. He fell backward, rifle discharging into the air. "McKenna!" Kellerman roared, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "Show yourself! Let the women go!" Caleb called back, "This is between us. Everything's between us now." Kellerman had found cover behind a boulder. His men spread out, professional despite the surprise. "You cost me a fortune at Redemption Creek. My reputation, everything." "You cost yourself those things when you showed your true colors." Clara shifted position, trying to get a clear shot. Below, Margaret Donovan had gathered her daughters tight, pressing them low to the ground. "Smart woman. Stay down. Stay quiet. Survive." The battle was brief but vicious. Caleb moved like smoke between the rocks, every shot finding its mark. Clara covered him, keeping Kellerman's men pinned, trying not to think about the fact that she was ending human lives. When one outlaw tried to flank them, she put him down without hesitation. Finally, only Kellerman remained, trapped behind his boulder, bleeding freely. "Just you and me now. McKenna, how about we settle this proper, face to face, like men? I'm done with your games." Kellerman. "What about her games?" Kellerman's laugh was ugly. "You think she loves you, McKenna? Women like her, raised proper, they play at wildness until something better comes along. She'll leave you eventually. They always do." "You're wrong," Clara called out, surprising everyone. "I'm not playing at anything. This is who I am, who I choose to be." She moved before Caleb could stop her, circling wide, using every lesson he'd taught her about desert movement. Kellerman was focused on Caleb's position, growing weaker from blood loss, getting sloppy. When she had the angle, she didn't hesitate. 2 shots. Center mass. Kellerman looked down at his chest in surprise, then up at her. "The preacher's daughter." He wheezed. "Well, I'll be damned. Probably." Clara agreed. Kellerman fell forward and didn't move again. In the silence that followed, broken only by the Donovan girls sobbing, Clara felt something fundamental shift inside her. She'd killed in the heat of battle before, but this was different, calculated, necessary. She waited for guilt, for horror, for her father's voice quoting scripture about violence. Instead, she felt only a vast relief. The threat was ended. The innocent were saved. Sometimes, in this hard land, that was enough. They brought the Donovans home to find Silver Creek in an uproar. Will had raised the alarm, and half the town was prepared to ride to their rescue. When they saw the women safe, a cheer went up that echoed off the mountains. "Kellerman?" Sheriff Cross asked. "Dead," Caleb said simply. "His men too, self-defense. Good enough for me." The sheriff spat tobacco juice. "Good riddance to bad rubbish." That night, as Clara and Caleb sat on their porch watching stars emerge, she finally asked the question that had ridden with them all the way home. "Does it get easier, the killing?" "No." His arm came around her, solid and warm. "If it does, that's when you know you've lost something essential. But sometimes it's necessary to protect what matters. The girls would have suffered terribly, or died. You saved them. Clara, remember that when the doubts come calling." She leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I've become someone I don't fully recognize, someone my father would have prayed for or condemned. You've become yourself. No pretense, no hiding." He kissed her temple. "And for what it's worth, I think your father would understand. At the end, he saw clearly enough. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their valley settle into sleep. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. School to establish, crops to tend, a life to continue building. But tonight, they were home, safe, together. Caleb? Next week, after I've started teaching, let's ride to Fort Grant, find that judge. She turned to look at him. I want to marry you, properly. Not because we should or because people expect it, but because I choose it. Choose you. Every day. But especially tomorrow. His smile was slow, warm as sunrise. Clara Whitmore, are you proposing to me? I am, what's your answer, rebel cowboy? Instead of words, he kissed her, deep and sure as their roots in this valley soil. When they finally broke apart, the stars were wheeling overhead in their eternal dance. Yes, he said simply. Forever yes. They went inside then, to their bed, their home, their chosen life, outside. Coyotes sang to the moon, and the creek gurgled with promise of rain to come. The cabin walls, built by their own hands, held strong against the night. In the morning, they would wake to work and purpose, to the future they were building day by day. Clara would teach the children of Silver Creek, including the Donovan girls, showing them that strength came in many forms. Caleb would train horses and gradually let his reputation as a gunfighter fade, becoming simply a rancher, a husband, a man at peace. But all that was tomorrow. Tonight. Clara Whitmore and Caleb McKenna held each other in the darkness, two souls who'd found home in the most unlikely place, each other's arms. The preacher's daughter had shared one moonlit night with danger and discovered herself. The rebel cowboy had returned, bringing not destruction, but redemption. Together, they'd written a different ending to their story, one measured not in violence, but in vegetables grown, in children taught, in love that endured despite, or perhaps because of, the trials that had forged it. Outside, the moon rose full and bright over their valley, the same moon that had witnessed their first meeting by a dying creek. But now the creek ran full, the land bloomed with promise, and two hearts beat as one in a cabin built of dreams and determination. In the annals of the frontier, their story might be forgotten, overshadowed by more dramatic tales, but in that valley, in that moment, it was enough. They were enough. Love, hard-won and freely chosen, was more than enough. The stars wheeled on, indifferent and eternal, but below, in a rough cabin on a quarter section of hope, Clara and Caleb McKenna began the rest of their lives, together, forever. And that, as Clara would tell her students in years to come, was the greatest adventure of all. Thank you for listening to this Wild West love story. I'd love to hear where you're enjoying this tale, whether you're listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps under your own starlit sky. Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about Clara and Caleb's journey in the comments below. Your feedback helps bring more of these frontier stories to life.